Okay, good morning everybody, and I think it's time to get the debating party started. So my name is Thomas Serkovich, and I'll talk to you later about me, but that's not the important thing. Welcome to semi-final number 1 of this 2019 edition of the great Agri-Food Debate 2019. I've been reflecting about it and thinking I wish when I was in university I would have had an opportunity like this to participate. It's such an exciting opportunity. You're developing so many skills than you can think of, and it's actually a great series of topics that we're being discussing. But anyway, let's get on with proceedings quite soon. So first and foremost, thank everybody who has made it here, to all the teams, all the participants, their mentors. I know there's a lot of hard work behind it, and it's great that you're here. It's great that we are in Waterford's IT Sports Arena, an amazing place. It's my first time here, and I think it's a wonderful location, so thanks to Waterford IT for sharing the space with us. So, as I was saying, semi-final number 1, we have 2 teams. We have CAFRI, the College of Agriculture, Food and Rural Enterprise, and UCD. And as you may know, the topic for this semi-final is farming in Ireland should be scaled back to meet climate change commitments. So very interesting and very important and topical discussion. So I'm going to go through some rules and some background stuff, and then we'll get started. So first and foremost, tell you that this session this morning will be judged by 3 experienced and remarkable judges. So I might point them out to you while you're here. So I might start with Dike Potzel, who is the German ambassador to Ireland. She has been with us for almost a year and a half as in her post, and for the past 16 years she has been a member of the German Foreign Service, and she has lived in some very interesting places around the world in her career. Secondly, we have Owen McGuinness from Bank of Ireland, who's there on the first set of chairs, and Owen is with Bank of Ireland. He's a Senior Director of Relationship Management. He's been with the bank for 15 years. But what's important about Owen is that he has quite a lot of experience within the food and agribusiness sector, which is really important. And it is the same expertise that Glenn, who is our 3rd judge, who is over there, Glenn Shanley, who is from Ulster Bank, and Glenn is head of large corporates here in Ireland. Glenn has been for 11 years with Ulster Bank, and he also has significant expertise in this sector of food and agribusiness, which I think it's own. The results of that score will be totaled, and at the end of the debate, the winner will be the team with most points. But I'll come back to points in a second. Once the debate is finished, as you know, the judges will retire and they will choose the best speaker for this morning's debate. And as you know, it could be anybody of the young people around me, either winning or non-winning team. Now let's talk about bells and timekeeping, because that is critical, and I understand it's something we all need to be reminded ourselves. So speaking is for 4 minutes, and we have our timekeeper here keeping a close eye on the proceedings. So there will be 3 bells. The first one after minute 1, the second one after minute 3, and the third one at minute 4. And you know very well that you cannot go beyond the allocated time. And timekeeping is also critical, because if you speak more than the time allocated, points will be taken off you. Now, let's go to the other very important part of the rules, which is related to interruption and points of information, which, as you know, it is allowed within the rules of the debate. But I will ask you to be as clear as to why you're doing it, and as you know, there's a specific time when you can do it, and that's only between minutes 1 and 3. So between the first and the second bell is when you can make any interruptions or points of information. By all means, no insults, no derogatory or slanderous language or comments are going to be allowed. So I hope that is most of it, and as I said before, in terms of scores, the team with most scores will be the winner. However, if you have been marked down for exceeding your time or for abusing of your point of information, so keep an eye on your phones, except for the honourable people on the stage who cannot look at their phones. Okay, I hope all is clear, and we'll get started. So may I remind the topic again? Farming in Ireland should be scaled back to meet climate change commitments. So the two teams, CAFRE and UCD. So CAFRE will propose the motion, UCD will oppose the motion. And let's go straight into it. So proposing speaker number 1, your opening remarks.
Good morning, Chairperson, adjudicators, members of the opposition, ladies and gentlemen. Ich heiße Stephanie. My name is Stephanie. My teammates and I are proud to say that we, on stage here today, can represent what is thought of as some of the traditional farming practices in Ireland: sheep, dairy, beef and arable. So, to propose that farming in Ireland should be scaled back to meet climate change commitments is something that we can truly stand behind. We as a team know how this can affect our farms, our families and our futures. Climate change is turning the lives of farmers upside down and is fundamentally changing the way agriculture is practiced. Drastically different weather patterns, shorter growing seasons, extreme temperatures and many other changes pose daunting problems for many farmers across our Emerald Isle. Climate change is simply described as a change in the statistical distribution of weather patterns. Our commitment towards climate change in Ireland is falling short. Did you know Ireland is the second worst performing EU member state tackling climate change? Climate Change and Environment Minister Richard Burton has warned that the potential cost of not hitting the EU targets could amount to 5.5 billion in fines by 2030. My teammate Tarma will be explaining these targets as aligned in the Paris Agreement. Our third speaker today, Jasmine, will soon explain to us how farmers are on the front line of combating climate change, whether it be through simple, everyday measures to more large-scale operations. I cannot deny, and must be realistic with you all here today, there has been a change. Farming is not what it used to be. We here in Ireland need to be concerned about our future. We need to think sustainably. The most simple thing for my team and I to do today would be to stand here, all farmers, but simply scaling back must be done, or we won't have a land to farm in years to come. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, just to remind you two things. The judges are going to take a minute or two to go through their scoring criteria. They'll put scores against each intervention, and once I get the nod from them, we'll continue with the next intervention. In the meantime, I was reminded of another rule. This is the world of rules, and I think it's important to remind. It's about the fact that you shouldn't be conferring as teams while somebody is here on the podium, whether it's your team or the opposite team. So just as a reminder, and then we can take it from there. So I'm looking at Glenn, okay, Owen, okay, and we'll just wait a few more moments for Dyke. Now from UCD, opposing the debate topic, it's the time for Speaker 1, opening remarks.
Afternoon. My name is John O'Grady, and I am the leader of the UCD debating team. My teammates and I are honoured to be with you today and proud to vehemently oppose and strongly refute the motion that farming in Ireland should be scaled back in order to meet climate change commitments. First of all, before I outline what will be discussed here today, it is important that we understand what the motion actually means. What is farming? What does farming mean to you? It disappoints me that the proposition adopts such an archaic, traditional and stereotypical view of what farming is, because like the European Commission said in 1996, farming has developed more over the past 50 years than it has in the previous 2000. And coinciding with that powerful and true statement, my teammates and I would like to adopt a forward and progressive view of what farming is, and we would like to extend the definition of farming, because we believe that farming includes aspects like marine farming, solar farming, wind farming, bioenergy generation, and forestry. Is it any wonder why we were all up here studying agricultural science degrees? No, because the possibilities are endless. Also, ladies and gentlemen, what are our climate change commitments? We were all aware of the global Paris Climate Accord agreement to limit the increase in temperature to less than 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. However, that agreement will have no impact on us as a nation financially. What will have severe ramifications is our signature on the EU effort-sharing legislation, which illustrates that for the year 2020, just 1 year away, our emissions must be 20% lower than that of 2005. Now, I'm not going to pull the wool over your eyes, because we will not meet those targets and we will be financially penalised. That cup of coffee you and I had this morning, already gone up in price in the last budget, will probably cost us about €6. And that is a disaster, because anyone who knows me knows that I need my coffee. But in hindsight, that probably is a good thing, because rather than farming, it is our own personal consumption, importation of food, or travelling hobbies, which need to be scaled back drastically. Our industrial, residential, transport and waste sectors account for 66% of our nation's total greenhouse gas emissions. This is what our second speaker, Amy Mulcrone, will discuss in great detail, outlining stark figures like how the transport sector has increased its emissions by 145% compared to the year 1990. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is in stark contrast to what our third speaker, Simon Lanigan, will be discussing. He will outline how Ireland is at the forefront in farming efficiently through smart decisions, carbon sequestration schemes, intelligent breeding strategies, and adoption of renewable technology. All of these culminating in the fact that emissions from agriculture have decreased by 5.5% from the period of 1990 to 2015. The same time, emissions from transport have gone up 145%. Surely, it would be wise to scale back something like the transport sector, which is spiralling out of control like the cost of the new Children's Hospital in Dublin, which you will have to pay for as well. I fail to comprehend how the proposition can propose that we scale back farming, even though we are making significant progress in our area. I believe deep down, they know it too. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you listen to our points and join us in strongly opposing this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And again, while the judges do their work. I don't know if you watched 2 days ago Primetime, and there was a debate on similar topic like this. Obviously, I won't comment around it, but it was Michael Healy-Rae and Eamon Ryan. So interesting contraposition of viewpoints. And I was thinking about what makes a good debate, and obviously it's about the delivery. And I think politicians are very good at delivery, but maybe sometimes they're not great at the content of the delivery. But I think that's at least to me the essence, and that's why these things are very important. But it's great to see that Dawn Meat have chosen such a topical issue, something that is so much top of mind at the moment. Okay. Owen is okay, and Glenn is okay, and Dyke is okay. So then we will continue. Now it is the turn of opposition speaker number 2 on the side of UCD.
I, Amy Mulcrone, want to ask a question. Why should farming in Ireland be scaled back to meet climate change commitments when the remaining sectors are responsible for 66% of total emissions? It seems to my team and I that farming has become the whipping boy for this debate on climate change. But at any given time, there are over 10,000 passenger aircrafts in the sky, carrying over 1 million people 24 hours a day, every day. There is no other discrete human activity that is more intensely polluting than flying. According to the CSO, the average Irish person travels up to 7 times a year. So if you decide to jet off to New York, the 10,000 kilometre round trip will generate over 280 tonnes of carbon dioxide. Let me put that into the Irish farmer's perspective. Aviation is the red meat in this greenhouse gas sandwich. From Lyons tea bags to HB ice cream, Shukra or Kimberley biscuits, to the vast quantities of milk, beef, chicken and potatoes, up to 3.5 million tonnes of our annual food consumption is imported, but it doesn't have to be. Potatoes are supposed to be the staple food of Ireland, yet we're importing a staggering 72,000 tonnes of them annually. Why are we wasting our precious food miles on a farm crop that can be produced here in Ireland? Although beef and dairy products are world-renowned, that doesn't stop us importing over 150 million euros worth of beef, or 478 million worth of potatoes. In 2006, despite having the resources, the final nail was put in the coffin when our native Shukra factory door closed. Our beloved brand Shukra is now manufactured in Germany, once again increasing our food miles. This is a classic example where our Irish farming was scaled back to satisfy political decisions. With the advancements in both technology and science, there is no reason why we cannot consume more Irish seasonal goods, grown, of course, here in Ireland, and reducing our food miles. Instead of scaling back Irish farming, we need to increase our commodities. Our level of milk production is back to where it was at its peak in 1990. Our overall emissions in methane, which our dairy sector is slated for, has reduced by 10.4% to the year 2015. Of course, as we increase farming, the environmental implications are a concern. But if we take a look at other farming strategies, such as incorporating the wind, solar, carbon neutral farming or agroforestry, Within our Irish farms, the benefits are uncanny both financially and environmentally. For unproductive land, such as common mountainage or for heavy ground soils, this is a great investment to incorporate a renewable energy source within our Irish farming. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, deliberation time again. Amy was talking about potatoes, and this morning I had a quinoa yogurt, which was the first time in my life, and I'm not sure I would recommend that, but anyway. It's interesting the evolution there is in the food industry, and it's interesting to see where it's going. I wonder what the staple food of 2050 will be, but anyway. I'm sure you'll have ideas around that, and I also have, but I can't tell them for the moment. Cool. So, Daika, Glenn, and Owen, excellent. So, we're now back to Caffrey, and it's time for proposition speaker number 2.
Ali, Brona, Callum, Deirdre, Eric. Do these names mean anything to you, the opposition? Do these names mean anything to you, the audience here this morning? My name is Tara McClure, a farmer's daughter from County Antrim, and I am angry because in as many weeks as 2019 has seen, my crops have been bashed and bruised by all of the storms that I have just named. My job here this morning is to convince you, if it is not already evident, that the climate change initiatives put in place by our government aren't working. And now all eyes turn to our farming community in an attempt to seek blame. Kyoto, Montreal, and the Paris Agreement. Big initiatives with big ideas. Me, a farmer's daughter, working a small farm with small resources. The Cambridge Dictionary defines climate change as CO2 in the atmosphere. The IPCC has stated that man-made greenhouse gases are the primary cause of this warming. UK and Irish agriculture accounts for 1/3 of national greenhouse gas emissions, the majority of which is coming from dairy cows, whose sole purpose is to keep us in fresh milk. The naturally occurring levels of methane, which is reported by The Guardian as being 11% higher in UK and Ireland than estimated by environmentalists, is 25 times more potent than CO2, and therefore causing much more harm to our climate. Just this morning, BBC News reported on a 13-year-old girl from the Scottish Highlands who will walk out of her school lessons to publicly protest at what she sees as the Scottish Government's lack of care for climate change. It should not be the case that school children feel duty-bound to miss part of their education to take a stand. Irish farmers today have an opportunity in scaling back their farming practices to prevent these protests reaching our school playgrounds. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. I think it's great to see we have both the CAFRE and the UCD trainers on the on the road today. I'm sure they're suffering as much as all of us here up on stage, going through notes and preparation. Sure must have been quite intense. So good on you. We might have to carbon footprint the travel of all our audience today and see how we're doing. I was also reminded about the whole issue of activism and how much climate activism is now taking place worldwide. I'm not sure if you've heard about this 16-year-old activist, Greta Thunberg. It's this. Anyway, above and beyond the content, it's great to see that there's so much awareness around the topic. My three judges are nodding insistently, saying move on. So now it's time to go back to UCD, and it's time for opposition speaker number 3.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Simon Lanigan, and this evening I am honoured to be representing UCD. Today, we are strongly opposing this motion. Phil Hogan, the European Commissioner for Agriculture, stated recently in relation to climate change that farmers are not the problem, farmers are the solution. This was a very powerful statement that came during the week of the infamous Lancet report. The Lancet report on climate change is simply not representative to the way we farm here in Ireland. The report, which was funded by soybean companies, may I add, based their research on intensive indoor concentrate-fed farms and not pasture-based farming, which is carried out here in Ireland. It is inaccurate and simply unfair to compare these two completely opposite ways of farming. Ireland has many advantages when it comes to sustainable food production. Origin Green states that, and I quote, "Our grass-based system is more efficient and environmentally sustainable than intense indoor animal feeding systems due to our long grass growing season and ideal conditions for rearing livestock and growing many crops." According to the IPCC guidelines for national greenhouse gas inventories, stated that a dairy cow in Western Europe produces 100 kgs of methane per head per year, in exchange for 5,000 kgs of milk. But in Africa and other developing countries, a dairy cow might only produce 36 kgs of methane per cow per year, but this is only in exchange for 500 kgs of milk. Stephanie said that we are the second worst in the EU at combating climate change, but we are nearly 4 times more efficient compared to these countries in terms of milk production. These studies conclude that we simply do not need to scale back to meet these climate change commitments, as we are already at the forefront of efficiency and farming sustainability here in Ireland. According to the World Health Organization, our population is going to be roughly 10 billion people by the year 2050. Now, the Food and Agriculture Organization predicts that farmers will have to produce 60% more food to feed this population. Now, let me repeat this. 60% more food has to be produced to feed our world population in 2050. Now, does the opposition suppose that these people go hungry? We need practical solutions for this demand crisis. The world will need global leaders to feed its population, and Ireland's advanced agriculture industry is the solution to this. Instead of scaling back, as the opposition outrageously suggests, we should continue forward and grow our industry. The environment situation is not solely based on the agriculture industry, but on every industry and inhabitant of this planet. And it is about time that other industries and people in towns and cities own up and take responsibility for their harmful actions to the environment, as Amy outlined earlier. As I stated in my introduction, farmers are not the problem, farmers are the solution. My teammates and I urge you to stand with us in saying that farming in Ireland should not be scaled back to meet climate change commitments. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Okay. So we're probably gone past half mark of our debate, and I'm sure our judges are getting more and more inputs into their charts to see how this is all evolving. I was telling Richard Clinton from Don Meats earlier. I think it's great that a company like Don is choosing such interesting topics to generate the discussion. And again, I think it's very much needed. We hear a lot in the media about one side, the other side, politicians one side, the other side, but at the end of the day, it's great to see that we need to reflect ourselves as much as anybody else on this. Glenn looks like he's okay. Daike looks like she's okay, and so is Owen. So now we go back to Caffrey and proposition speaker number 3. Thank you.
Good morning, adjudicators, members of the opposition, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jasmine Herdman. I am a dairy farmer from County Armagh. Farming today is not the stereotypical old MacDonald had a farm. Technology. We have it in our work, at home, and even in our hands today. Technology changes every day. Is this the answer to climate change? One solution trialled at our sister Caffrey campus, Greenmount, came up with a solution to the pollution. Now please excuse me for some potty talk, but they have trialled slatted houses which will separate solids and liquids, which help reduce ammonia emissions for housed cattle. Now to raise your minds from the gutters to the skies. Specially designed slatted roofing can allow fresh air into the shed, but doesn't reach the slurry tank to encourage ammonia emissions. Wind turbines, water turbines, solar panels, anaerobic digesters, these are all examples of how modern technology can be used to help limit the impact of farming, and it has on climate change. But are these solutions for everyone? Myself, coming from a small farm in County Armagh, understand that this may not be possible. What practical solutions can be integrated into our daily farming practices? Analysing of silage samples. This information will provide nutritional context to ensure protein content is not excessive in livestock diets. I work for an animal feed company, and I know farmers would be delighted to knock off a couple of pounds off their meal bill every month, because we all know Northern Irish farmers can be considerably tight. Changing from traditional slurry tankers with splash plates to simple dribble bars. Analysing soil for application of the most efficient and effective fertilisers. These are all solutions that we as farmers can do daily. And this will also help scale back and affect our climate change. The opposition has mentioned small contributions that they believe farming on climate change and that they lie the blame on. From what I have talked about today, it may seem like farmers are doing enough already to help combat climate change. As we have stated, we know it is not realistic to ask every farmer to cut back stock numbers for the greater good. But farmers that I know are not irresponsible, farmers that I know are willing to help. Spring, summer, autumn, winter, 24/7, 365 days a year. They are the ones who are feeling at first hand the effects of climate change. What goes around simply comes back around. The scaling back that we want to see from farming is scaling back of farming's contribution to climate change. Be it less intensive farming, be it reducing stock levels, or be it by more efficient and more farming practices. The scaling back of farming's contribution to climate change and the scaling up of efficient solutions that farmers can do to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. Okay, at this point we have completed the 3 speakers from each the proposition and the opposition, and the next stage is the most exciting one, which is the closing argument. So as soon as the judges have finished their very important marking of this last intervention, we can move on to the next stage. Thank you, Daika. Thank you, Owen. Thank you, Glenn. So we're getting to the crunch of the debate this morning, and I'm very curious to see what judges and what people in the room will have to say in terms of this very important topic of scaling farming to meet climate change commitments. So I think, John, you're back on stage for the closing arguments of the opposition speaker. Opposition side, sorry.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon once again. Before I make my closing statement, I just want to reiterate that we as a team strongly dispute the motion that farming in Ireland should be scaled back in order to meet climate change commitments. Simon, Amy and myself do believe that climate change commitments need to be adhered to in order to avoid both financial hardship and reputational damage. However, for the country of Ireland, it is not farming which needs to be scaled back, as significant progress has and is being made in the agricultural sector, as mentioned by my colleague Simon. Now, the opposition may use buzzwords like Kyoto, methane, hunger, less resources. However, what they fail to do is critically analyse in an objective way each sector which contributes emissions, causing us to drastically miss our climate change commitments as outlined by the EU effort-sharing legislation. My teammates and I acknowledge that farming produces greenhouse gases. We would be foolish not to. However, in terms of emissions, farming is just a diminutive piece, consistently getting smaller, of a larger pie which is incessantly getting bigger, as outlined by the combined effort of both Amy and Simon. As I mentioned in my opening statement, my teammates and I adopted a progressive and forward-thinking view of what farming entails, contrary to what the proposition stated. And the third speaker almost essentially agreed with me by suggesting that renewable technology, wind farming, can be used as a solution to meeting our climate change commitments. And let me just explore the forestry sector. Farming, as I defined forestry, is included in my farming definition. And what sets farming apart from all the other sectors is that farming is the only sector which can sequester carbon from the atmosphere by actually being enlarged, totally opposite to what CAFRE are proposing. And Chog has proposed 5 ways to carbon neutrality, with afforestation being the most feasible and environmentally friendly. They propose that by expanding the afforestation rate by 150% by the year 2050, it would reduce the carbon in the atmosphere by 7.5 metric tonnes of CO2 per year. That's 7,500 kilograms. And before the opposition cut across me by saying we do not have the land to support these targets, the report commissioned by Teagasc stated, and I quote, "There is sufficient suitable land area available for forestry to meet these planting rates assumed in this scenario without undue competition for land with intensive agricultural production." I just want to reiterate that you stated that the global ag emissions is 14.5%. However, the motion asked us to talk about farming in Ireland, not on the global scale. And you also outlined how people are protesting in Scotland, but that's a total different jurisdiction to Ireland, as is asking us to talk about in the motion. Ladies and gentlemen, the words which John F. Kennedy spoke in the Dáil almost 56 years ago emphatically epitomised the problems which we now face today. He said, "The supreme reality of our time is our indivisibility as children of God and the common vulnerability of this planet." Ladies and gentlemen, global action needs to be taken to meet the COP21 Paris Agreement. But for the country of Ireland and the repercussions of our signature on the EU effort-sharing legislation, it is not farming which needs to be curtailed, it is our own environmentally degrading habits, our personal consumption of imported food, and our inability to unilaterally show emotion in the face of habitat destruction and species extinction. Ladies and gentlemen, unless action is taken to reduce our own personal flaws, I fear for the world which will be left for my children, my grandchildren, all our children.
Thank you, John. Well done. And I wonder if the social media is as tense as it is up here. I obviously cannot look at my phone, but I hope it is, because it's really now getting to a very exciting stage where we're very close to the end and finding out where are we all going to go as a society and as an economy when it comes to this very critical issue. Thank you, Owen, Glenn, and Dike. Okay, now time for Stephanie to come back on stage for the CAFRE closing arguments proposing this debate. Thank you.
Good morning again. In conclusion, Chairperson, adjudicators, members of the opposition, ladies and gentlemen. Ultimately, climate change presents a real and definitive challenge to Irish agriculture, and it will take a coordinated effort by all stakeholders to mitigate the impact. In the words of Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, we are the laggard in Europe on climate change. Just think about that. Both the beef and dairy sector are carbon emitting and have to be scaled back massively if we are to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In reference to your point, Speaker 2, if Ireland's at the forefront, why is farming still contributing over 1/3 to all emissions? You can't argue with that figure. Also, Speaker 2, why are we importing this beef? Look at our beef sector at the minute. Our factories, chills and stores are working over capacity. Carcasses can't be shifted quick enough to allow our farmers to take their animals to the abattoir. If this doesn't ring scale back alarm bells in your ears, I don't know what will. Our population in Ireland is 4.7 million, but we produce enough beef and dairy to feed 35 million people. There's something simply just not quite right here. There's a clear gap where farming can be scaled back, and we as a country could meet climate change commitments and still feed our people. But the problem is, farmers feel the pressure to get big or get out, to build their family farms into large enterprises. The thick and thin of it is, climate change is not the only clouds we have to worry about then. Research has shown 73% of farmers recorded high levels of depression and stress. From this shocking statistic, building large farming enterprises seems to pull a black cloud of gloom over the eyes of many farmers. In reference to your point, Speaker 1, if we did not have a traditional few, we would have nothing to base our advancements on. I also acknowledged in my opening remarks that farming has changed, so to presume that I have a traditional view is very assumptuous. We from Northern Ireland still consider ourselves as part of the UK. So to assume that we do not care about our Scottish neighbours, I find that somewhat rude. Also, 14.5%, that statistic, you definitely pulled that one out of the sky. In our opinion, the most effective way of addressing climate change is by reducing carbon emissions and maximising effective renewable energy resources. With that in mind, let me remind you of the well-known nursery rhyme. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on that farm he had some pigs, sheep, hens and cows. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Well done to you too. And well, that was quite an amazing session. So can I make a proposal that we give an outstanding applause to both teams for this great intervention? Well, now we can relax and start looking a bit more in depth at the debate topics. And obviously there's a key point in my instructions that says that the stance taken by the teams are positions that they have been assigned by random, and they may or may not reflect their point of view. So I'll be curious to see what is their real point of view now in a minute when we get into this. Or maybe they've got so into it that that is the real point of view. But anyway, we'll get to that in a second. So let me tell you what's happening right now. So our three judges are doing the evaluation for the final intervention, which was the CAFRI closing arguments. And as soon as they're finished, they're going to stand up and they're going to leave the room and they're going to go somewhere far, far away and debate on not on who is the winning team. The winning team has already been decided. It's on those sheets of paper that they have, and that's where the result is. But they're going to choose who has been the best speaker of the six that you have heard from this morning. So tension and tension and tension. Let's see how far this takes us. So it looks like, okay, so I'll be back. I better put this here. Okay, time to reveal the truth. And the judges had a tough session out there in their deliberation room. There was no joy, as I understand, because it was tough going. So let me tell you that this semi-final gave as a result a draw. So both teams scored exactly the same amount of points, which is something that can happen, and it's part of the rules of this debate. So when that happens, the next step is that the three judges had to deliberate and select one of the two teams as the winner, and they have reached a consensus. And anyway, no more hesitation or stopping it, but they have chosen CAFRI as the winner. So congratulations.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we're actually running behind time, so we're going to start off straight away again.
Okay. So just before we go into the next debate, I just have one more thing to ask you, and it's to give a proper recognition to the judges who had had a really tough morning. So well done to the judges for their job. And again, congratulations to both teams. You really put up an amazing fight up here. So we're going to go straight away into the next debate, and I'll leave the stage to the next moderator. Thank you.